Welcome to Cloud and Clear, the podcast by SADA for innovative business leaders and technology enthusiasts, where we explore how Google Cloud is transforming the industry and what that means to you. Now here's your host, Tony Safoian.
All right, Chris Lehman, welcome to Cloud and Clear.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. It's great to be here.
Appreciate you being my guest.
Absolutely.
I like to dig in all the interesting parts of SADA, bring in our practice leads, talk about all the great and exciting things we're doing and also what we're seeing with customers. And I think it's great to have none other than the leader of our GCP engineering team.
Well, thank you.
And especially from your perspective, and I'd love you to kind of give a little bit of an intro of where you came from, what you've done, why you decided to come here, because I think, that's really interesting.
I've been in the engineering field for almost 20 years. I'm self-taught. I started out right around the dot-com days, so it was great timing to get involved in the industry. I remember when I was starting out that my answering machine got filled to capacity with recruiters, for example. But yeah, I started in San Francisco at several small companies, moved to Yahoo and worked there on their ad platforms for about 5 years.
That was the time you were there. That was like a really cool time to be at Yahoo.
Yeah, Yahoo was a lot of fun. They had a great culture and, it was a fun place, but people worked really hard. I learned a lot.
And they were breaking new ground in engineering.
They were breaking new ground. They were, developing very instrumental in the whole Hadoop ecosystem. So there were a lot of folks at Yahoo that were contributing and very involved in that project. That I think is perhaps one of the most high-profile projects that Yahoo's been involved in. That was a very interesting time. Spent another 5 years at Symantec Entertainment Partners, leading their cloud platforms. They're the largest payroll provider in the entertainment industry. And then moved here to SADA Systems.
And you happen to be local here in LA, which is great.
That's right. It's great to be here. It's a small pond, I think, in comparison to Silicon Valley, so you pretty much know everyone in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. And we're in North Hollywood, so we're basically in entertainment.
Yeah.
Even though what we do is cloud.
Exactly.
We sit right next to the Academy building.
That's great. Right, yep.
So I think, this role was super important for us to fill, and we looked for a long time because I think it takes a combination of sort of engineering acumen and experience, leadership, because I think leading engineers is sort of an art and a science in itself, and it's very different than I think leading almost any other type of group as a leader. And also this sort of orientation towards wanting to learn new things and break new ground, which is something we have to do all the time by virtue of not just being a Google Cloud partner, because that has its own aspect of being groundbreaking all the time, but GCP is sort of the tip of the spear. It's the tip of the spear. So unless, you had this orientation of a high degree of comfort with the unknown, high tolerance for pain.
Yeah, well, I think engineering is like that in many respects. You have to have a high tolerance for ambiguity. Certainly, you put your best minds at work on problems and try to come up with solutions that makes everyone happy. But I think one observation that I have coming to SADA Systems was certainly getting much more deeply involved in GCP. I've had a background working with the AWS cloud for some time. When I started using GCP, I noticed, I think a lot of things stood out to me. One of the things that attracted me was the background of innovation at Google and how, I think it's really interesting how they have so many internal products that they used for their own, global wide scale as far as their advertising systems and G Suite and everything else, and how they converted those into commercial products on GCP. I mean, I could go down a long list. I personally find it really interesting. Borg, which started out as a container technology solution in 2003, turned into products in GCP, App Engine, obviously Kubernetes, the open source platform we all know for orchestrating containers. Container Engine, which eventually became Kubernetes Engine in 2015. The foundations for all of those came from Borg. There's a famous MapReduce paper which led to Hadoop. I was just talking about that earlier. Yahoo was very involved in that effort, and that, of course, turned into the Dataproc product that which is the managed solution for Hadoop. Bigtable was a very influential paper that then had a very large following in the community with HBase, which was also released on GCP as Bigtable in 2015. BigQuery has foundations in innovations at Google. Dremel, as far as the front-end engine, and Colossus, which actually came after Google File System, as the foundation for that product, as well as cloud storage and Bigtable. TensorFlow, which a lot of folks know for how high profile it is in machine learning. That was an innovation at Google, which again was open sourced and then became released with or supported with Cloud ML Engine and now AI Platform. I could just keep going. It's pretty impressive at the end of the day.
This is something that we don't talk about that often, but sometimes it comes up, and I think it's absolutely true that it's not like Google went out 15 years ago with their ambitions of like, let's create these things so we can one day take them to market, right? Those ideas came later in enterprise, but like they had to do these things.
They had to do this
for their own needs.
That's exactly right. They were one of the first big data pioneers, perhaps the poster child of a big data pioneer. They were dealing with issues at global scale before most companies. And so, I think it's really interesting. Certainly in engineering, I think engineers have a mindset of adopting practices internally before making them available for customers and clients. This idea of dogfooding your own work and then making it available is certainly common, and we can see that this is certainly something that Google has done very successfully with GCP.
Yeah, I think relative to the other big cloud providers, I mean, none of them are running 8-9 applications serving billion plus users a month. I think, and to your point about where Google came from, just for cloud Google, just for Google search, for Google.com to work in the early days, these technologies, it was like a necessity that they be invented. And what's great, of course, in great Google tradition is to actually write the white papers, open source these technologies to really drive the industry forward and create the standards in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's something that attracts engineers. It certainly attracted me to this opportunity here with SADA and to GCP, was their whole mentality about openness, philosophically being open, embracing open source, providing a lot of thought leadership, and I think steering in a very open way the conversation in the community about where technologies are going, and then living their words with GCP. They have comparable products to other vendors, but where I think they really shine is how, for example, they've embraced technologies like containerization and Kubernetes, which is now influencing so many products. The entire strategy around hybrid cloud, something that I see, in the trenches day to day with our customers, Google is fully embracing with Anthos. Kubernetes is at the core of that vision. The idea of hybrid cloud, of multi-cloud, is quite compelling to the extent that, customers can containerize their workloads. They can essentially run them anywhere. And, Google has, in all of its, I think, developer-facing documentation and guidance and blogs, there's a consistent pattern of embracing that notion and not really leading the customer into any kind of lock-in with the platform.
You were telling me earlier as we were talking about this stuff is that it's almost like the bigger the customer, the more this is a concern. But just generally speaking, in your engagements, you've been here now several months, kind of building and scaling this team with a lot of interaction with customers, as every great leader does, by the way, just getting really deep with customers. Like, you're seeing a pattern of why GCP and why Google, and it has a lot to do with this concept of no lock-in.
Yeah, no lock-in is huge. Well, price, of course, as well, because GCP tends to be very price competitive with other clouds, and in fact, superior in many respects. So that's a compelling factor, as it always is.
But is it like apples to apples, much cheaper, like storage versus storage or compute versus compute? Like,
it really is.
Is it just that?
Yeah, well, that's certainly part of it. And so, kind of a mechanical analysis of apples to apples comparison, GCP is very favorable. But, I think even more important to a lot of our customers is this notion of avoidance of vendor lock-in. And that's why I like to, go back to, this topic of containers and Kubernetes, because it really does influence so much as far as the offerings. If you want to deploy an application on App Engine, if it's, it's extremely simple. If it's built on Docker, and it's easy to move. Same thing with Kubernetes Engine. Anthos is predicated on the concept of being able to run containerized applications both on-prem and on GCP, being able to fluidly move workloads back and forth. That emphasis on openness and flexibility is just at the core of so much of their approach.
Yeah, and they've always been kind of in that camp, just contributing to the open source community actively. And I think, by and large, open source has won. Right?
Sure.
In a lot of ways, I think they're on the right side of history for that.
They certainly are, and they've adopted. They've also, I think it's worth noting, completely adopted open source projects that didn't actually start at Google either. So while their own internal innovations have, in many cases, influenced the open source community and then have even come back, right, there are instances where they've fully embraced open source, like Airflow, for example, and Cloud Composer, which didn't actually start out as a Google project, but certainly they've embraced the idea of good open source projects that they can make available on GCP, and customers notice that, because when they're able to build obviously at an open standard, then they're not compelled to stay with Google, for example. It's just based on performance.
I remember the early days of G Suite. There was, others were starting, their sort of SaaS offerings, whatever it was. even in the G Suite days, people were afraid of lock-in. Like, oh my God, if I move my email to this platform and my documents to this platform, how can I get it out? Google developed and kind of launched like the APIs to get your data out even before they created the tools to get your data in. So it's almost like this core philosophy they've had for a decade plus about like lock-in is bad and will always operate with that mentality, because in that environment, customers win and the best products win over time because they don't stay with you because they can't get out, but they stay with you because of value.
That's right. They compete on the merits. And that's really refreshing.
You've been doing a lot of hiring, restructuring the team, gotten a lot of great guidance from Thomas Curry and on down around what we see kind of as the opportunities. Can we talk about the team dynamics? Like, what kind of skill sets do you have on your team now? And maybe how has the guidance from TK on down guided that approach now and moving forward?
Well, our team has a fairly broad mix of expertise, everything from infrastructure specialists with DevOps who are very good at moving workloads from cloud to cloud, writing infrastructure as code, automation, and Terraform as a technology stack that you can apply across multiple clouds, to application developers who have expertise on the specific offerings within GCP, and so we can build applications that take advantage of Google's strengths, to data analytics, data pipelines, data lakes, data warehouses. And so having expertise in those areas is also important. Foundations are critical. So we've got several people on the team who specialize in networking, security, setting up your, foundations for a successful project with IAM and permissions.
Very important.
Absolutely. Since we align so closely, with Google, I've been working to structure the team in such a way that there's a fairly close one-to-one correspondence with what Google terms their priority pillars and priority workloads. At the end of the day, those really come back to modernizing your infrastructure and your apps, moving your workloads into the cloud in as seamless, as simple a way as possible. And that includes data, which is often overlooked, but one of the most complicated aspects of migration. Breaking out our data analytics, our smart analytics sub-practice with emphasis on data lake, data warehousing, and machine learning. So those are the areas that we're investing in the most for the remainder of this year.
I think that makes perfect sense. It's actually refreshing, and I've talked about this before, but it's refreshing to actually get that kind of read on the market from Google, like TK on down. Now we can speak the same language with our counterparts at Google. We can be on message with customers. And I think the things that we're choosing to do are both, very, very specific, that we know is a constant, sort of consistent cause of both pain at customers today and opportunity today to demonstrate transformation, sort of one bite at a time. And I think it also is our job to demonstrate that this journey to the cloud, to GCP, doesn't necessarily have to be complex or daunting out of the gate. Like, there's ways to get in and demonstrate proof points, create a framework and a platform for a broader migration and investment over the long term. But it's not like, I think a lot of customers and leaders and CIOs and CTOs and heads of engineering, they get stuck in this, like, how do we get started mode?
Yeah, either that or, they sort of fall into the trap of boiling the ocean and thinking about how do they do everything at once. Exactly. And that certainly I think a very clear takeaway from what I've seen being successful is to focus on something small, something that's specific, perhaps a proof of concept for the company, to get their feet wet, become acclimated with GCP, and get traction on a project on a smaller scale. And then once they build up some of that confidence, then layering on top of that.
Again, we're still in this modality. We're learning. I think the whole industry is learning. Kind of listening to our customers sometimes, not being prescriptive enough. Like, we've had customers that totally wanted to boil the ocean.
Oh, absolutely,
and
yes.
it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
We always
work.
look back and we're like, God, I wish we just picked one workload.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty consistent takeaway. That helps to focus, the customer as well as the engineering team, because then you can obviously get at a outcome a lot faster.
Think of the last 2 or 3 projects. What are customers commonly moving first?
I've seen 2 models where customers either are trying to just move fast, and so it's a lift and shift sort of approach using tools like Strata. You can stream your VMs over essentially byte for byte straight into the cloud.
But what's on those VMs? What are they moving? What are they choosing to move first?
I think the best way to describe it is more by environment rather by workload. I've seen, one of our biggest customers moving all of their critical applications broken down across environments, and
internal applications, customer-facing
applications. When they take this VM migration approach, it's more about just lifting it and moving it. So it's a little less important to be focused on, I think, distinct workloads. I've also seen the other approach where, it's much more of a concept of a mutable infrastructure and being able to design infrastructure as code, totally programmatic. So rather than, just moving it as fast as possible and not trying to dynamically recreate your infrastructure, rather just get it there as fast as you can. Taking the opposite approach, being very thoughtful about, okay, let's build this exactly the way that we would want to long term and just focus on something small. And that's the other approach that we've seen, and in fact has actually worked quite well.
So like looking at this as an opportunity to re-architect?
Looking at it as an opportunity to re-architect, to move to cloud native analogs to, what they already have, taking advantage of no ops or completely managed type offerings, and building an entire infrastructure as code pipeline so that, basically with a single click, you could spin up your entire environment, including your workload, which is incredibly useful for any number of reasons, including conducting experiments and then throwing away your environment when you're done.
So customers that choose B, which is not just like lift and shift and a lot and quick, but taking this opportunity to re-architect, swap out, infrastructure services and actual servers for platform services and their corollaries. I mean, isn't B kind of the promise of moving to cloud as far as really embracing the opportunity to experience cost savings in a significant way, or like really transform the way applications are delivered, released, taken to market to serve their customers, to their own end customers, like our customers.
Yes. The short answer to your question is absolutely. Embracing a full, I would say, DevOps mentality around, small teams, rapid feedback, shortening release cycles as much as possible, leveraging technology that makes that easy, such as automation as much as possible, containers so that you've got a consistent experience across environments, regardless of which environment it's in. The teams that are embracing those kind of transformative changes are, the ones that are certainly set up, for success the most and can get the most out of moving to the cloud. But, it depends on the customer. Sometimes, it's in their interest to move first and then improve what they have after the fact. And, other teams, want to make those changes in their controlled environment that they're used to, and then migrate after they've made it ready.
Yeah, I mean, lift and shift it's production, but it's almost like a staging environment for re-architecting later.
It really is. Yeah, it's more about speed than anything else. I think that's actually, it's interesting that we're talking about this fundamental decision that you have to make, either modernizing up front and then moving, or moving right away and modernizing after the fact. Yeah. This is one of the compelling promises of Anthos, is actually the capability of doing both at the same time with their Anthos migration capability, which will containerize your applications as it migrates them to the cloud, which is quite intriguing.
It's almost like science fiction.
Well,
containerize as you migrate.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. No doubt about that. Yeah,
that is the decision that IT organizations are making all the time, and we help them make those decisions. I think. There's a process, a evaluation process, and a methodology.
Of course, yeah, we're very involved in that. So not only our solution architects, but our sales organization very much is involved in working with our customers. We have very technical folks across the spectrum who, if a customer is very savvy and understands what they want, compared to those that are just getting started in the cloud, we certainly provide guidance across the spectrum.
Yeah, and we're open to different approaches. We want to be as prescriptive as we can as far as risk reduction, increasing the probability of success. So we have to kind of layer that some level of flexibility.
Providing guidance for customers that's very specific to their own unique circumstances, but then also based on our experience operationalizing our common activities so that we can provide packaged solutions for customers too. So there's two ways of looking at the offerings that we give our clients.
What I'm excited about is, having now a Google Cloud only focused organization where we have very well established businesses across all parts of Google Cloud, but the GCP being the fastest growing, our services, professional services, managed services becoming more and more of a strategically important part of the offering, because these things don't migrate themselves. Customers don't want to do it alone, even if they can. And the amount of demand, a lot of our work has been with like software companies and SaaS, startups and other progressive companies, and we started to now do things that more traditional corporations, corporate customers, enterprise customers. And there's just like an immense amount of work to do. Like if I just look 5-10 years ahead, there's so much work because they all have to do this.
It's daunting, but it's exciting at the same time. If you think you've seen a huge wave moving to the cloud, just wait for the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to surpass it on an order of magnitude. There's no doubt about it.
It's unbelievable, but it's kind of why we love what we do. I think growth is always fun, but it's like a constant challenge of firsts and never been done befores and setting new standards. And I think that the team, you've built so far is tremendous, but I know it's growing fast and you're hiring, right? Like all the time.
Oh yes, absolutely. We're hiring across the team. We're looking for data specialists, machine learning, data warehouse experts, analytics, as well as, just core application development and DevOps capabilities. So we're really hiring, across the organization.
And so we're going to hopefully, introduce a mixed approach of getting really experienced and seasoned people from the ecosystem to creating a bench of, I think, newer entry-level talent that we develop and grow over time. So I'm excited about working on that with you as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that's definitely going to be exciting. I certainly subscribe to the two-pizza team kind of model with a balance of senior, mid-level folks. So I'm trying to achieve that kind of balance across all of our sub-practices.
And I know you're working very closely with Dana and also Miles now.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
On that strategy. I think there was a data person.
Data scientist, yes, that's right, that we just hired. We'll be joining later in July.
So that's starting to happen now that we have a lay of the land, and you're aligned with sort of Miles and Dana about those needs. So it's exciting, and it's great for me to watch and have these conversations with customers and with Google, and we'll do more of these. We'll talk about more customer stuff next time.
Absolutely. That sounds great, Tony.
Thank you so much for joining me, Chris.
Of course.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud and Clear and our website, sada.com. Be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app.